Hello, BookTube. Again, sorry for my absence yesterday. I was just feeling too down to make videos, and I'm consequently looking for things to make me feel up today, and one has dropped in my lap, and your lap as well. It's Tuesday, and that means an original tag from the guys at Strip Cover Lit. They've been doing just a fantastic string of tags all through 2019. And the latest one is from Adrian Fort. It's the AuthorTube in the Trenches tag, because he is a writer and one of the foremost champions of AuthorTube, the writer side of BookTube. And that's what all these questions are about, so I thought we'd just go through them. Number one is, do you have a sweetheart novel slash short story slash poetry project, a project that turned you into a, quote, serious writer? And I'm not sure that I would characterize myself as a serious writer. I'm not sure that any writer should. But if we mean by that a writer who knows what they're doing, then the project, of course, all of these things are iterations of the made-up stories, novels or short stories or poetry or whatnot. But if mine would be nonfiction, of course, it would be the writing of book reviews. And for me, the sweetheart project would be Open Letters Monthly, the online literary journal where I was the managing editor, which ran for 10 years and published a whole bunch of great stuff. And all of that stuff was group edited, and that really helped a lot. That at the same time that Open Letters was going on and flourishing, I was also getting back into the professional book reviewing world for the first time in a quarter of a century, and the two helped a lot. Those two things combined reminded me of something that's going to come up in this tag again, which is that writing is about an audience. So I would say it's a little bit of an odd answer, but I would say Open Letters Monthly would be that project, if anything is. Question number two, do you ever plan to work on a series-length project? I have a series-length project that has been on my mind for a long time, and that is an interlinked series of historical novels about the Flavian dynasty in ancient Rome. The idea I had would be that each novel was just the name of a character, and that character was the focal point of the novel. It's just never come off. It's just never happened. But I often do think about it. I do that same thing that so many writers do. I have a folder that I just fill with stuff that I find that I think will work well with that novel, without ever knowing if I'm ever going to make anything out of it. But that's what I would call it. And it would be the Flavian series. That's what it would be, just called that. Question number three, thoughts on mixed form projects, short stories that contain poems, novels that contain short stories, etc. Concentrate. Okay. Question number four, where do you picture publishing in 10 years? A fascinating question, something I think a lot about. Because right now, the publishing industry as it stands now is not workable. It is not a system that can stay. It's ridiculous. It always has been ridiculous. But now that the production costs have skyrocketed, the number of engaged readers willing to buy the product at the end of the line of that production cost is consistently going down. And the publishing houses themselves have been bought by Bertelsmann and are expected to turn a corporate world profit. These things combined with insane business practices on the part of the publishing world, like, for instance, book returns, where a publisher ships 4 cartons of a new Dale Brown to a bookstore, and the working model, the assumption is that the bookstore can return for full credit any copies they don't sell. That is just insane. That is an insane business practice, and it opens the door to all sorts of front-ended abuse, and the publishing world has all of that abuse. So I don't see that it can possibly last the way it is now, and there are all sorts of things chipping away at it. I don't think that the return procedure should exist. Stores used to be on the hook for what they ordered from publishers, and the good part of that, there were a few good parts to that. Number one, you needed a staff that knew books. You needed a staff, the store would have buyers. Usually a store with, for instance, 100 employees would have 6 or 7 buyers. Right now there are 7 or 8 buyers for Barnes & Noble, period. The whole chain. There are 7 or 8 buyers. You can fit them in one room. They work in New York and make the buying decisions for the whole chain. And they might have to know a lot about books, although some of the ones that I've known myself have not. But in ye olden days, before the corporatization of bookstores, before superstores, before Crocs and Brentanos or Barnes and Noble or Borders or whatever, each store, every bookstore, had to have people that either knew books or that were fired because they obviously didn't, because they made too many bad calls. Those are the people who would prowl Publishers Weekly and the catalogs and know the audience, know the area, know the store, and order accordingly, because you had to be careful with your orders because you couldn't return anything. That would be one great side effect of stores getting away from this business world model, would be that it would be the return of the knowledgeable bookseller. And well, they're all right now. The big retail chain bookstores in America, and probably a lot of them in the country where you live, it's an embarrassment. It's just an embarrassment. It's people who don't know books for the most part. And I guess that's always been kind of the rule and not the exception, but it used to be that you could go into a Barnes & Noble and find the book people, and they did know books. But Barnes & Noble doesn't want those people. Borders didn't want those people. Crocs and Brentanos didn't want those people. Those people tend to be a little more expensive, $1 more expensive than the people who don't know anything at all. I knew the writing on the wall. I was working at a Barnes & Noble when we started to computerize. I had been there before when there was the printed books in print volumes on the information counter, and where there was a dot matrix printout of the inventory of the store. Almost worthless. And I remember when we started to computerize, and I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. This is the whole inventory, and this is all the books in print. Great. It's a lot more convenient. One coworker of mine, it had to be 20 years ago, one coworker of mine, when we were getting a demonstration from the guy who ran the computer, brought it in to show it to us, one coworker of mine said, oh, so the upshot is that Steve's finally going to have someone to talk to. But I remember it wasn't long after that the computerized programs started to make recommendations. Started to say, if you like this, you'll like this. A very primitive version of the Amazon algorithm for recommending. That's when I saw the writing on the wall for what the corporate boardroom owners of bookstores wanted. Something has to change. And Adrian mentions when he does this tag, that the indie market for publishing is flourishing. And he's right, that he pictures it as some sort of farm team for the larger publishers. I wouldn't be surprised if the whole model gets inverted. Because indie authors right now don't have any of the disadvantages of authors that go through large mainstream publishers. And the only real advantage anymore is prestige. And prestige won't last in the face of money. Two budding authors, one goes the indie route, one goes the prestige dinosaur mainstream publishing route. The indie author is going to have more legs in his career and a lot more money. And that will tell the tale. In the long term, that will tell the tale. I would be willing to bet. Right now, mainstream publishers, they take an author and they say, well, here are all the decisions about your book that you don't get to make. We're going to make them all. We don't really care if you like them or not. We'll give you a little leeway here and there to pat you on the head, but most of the decisions will be ours. We have bought your product. Here's the amount of money that we'll give you, but now you have to travel all over the country, and we're not really going to subsidize that. You're not really expecting that, are you? No, instead you go and make appearances in bookstores, and I hope you sell books. Good on you. Essentially, the independent route, only with the imprimatur of Farrar, Straus & Giroux or Harper or whatever. I think that imprimatur will count for a lot less as time goes on if it doesn't make authors a career. We shall see. We'll check back in 10 years. Question number 5. If you could have one booktuber review your work, who would it be? Depends on what work we mean here. Review my fiction? My fiction is not good enough for anyone to review. Review my nonfiction? My book reviews? I'd love to hear it from anybody. I'm pretty good at writing book reviews. I've been doing it a very long time. I think I've written more book reviews for publication than anyone in the industry. But I write them for you. I write them for a reading public. Unlike a lot of my book reviewing colleagues, I do not write my book reviews for other book reviewers. And I don't write them to seem smart in the eyes of posterity. I write them for the people who have money in their pockets, but not enough money, and want to decide whether or not a book is worth their time and money. I write them for you. So if you have a problem with my book reviews, sing out. I haven't had in the last 10 years many complaints. But complaints are useful, as Adrian says many times in his tag. So I don't know booktuber. Book readers and any reader, it doesn't matter to me. If somebody reads a review of mine and says, well, here's what wasn't helpful in this review, then I'm all ears. I want to hear whether or not that's actually a legitimate way that I could improve the next review that I write. The only caveat I would add, since this is the 21st century and this is the internet age and this is the age of Twitter, is that even useful, accurate criticism of my work or anything else, even useful criticism, I will dismiss instantly if it comes wrapped around the brick of a personal insult. So if there are useful comments about a review of mine that are prefaced or ended with, you're stupid, then I don't care if you're making sense. I will not tolerate the kind of 21st century rudeness that seems to be part of the atmosphere now. I just will not tolerate it. But the rest of it, I'd love to hear that. Question number 6. Writers' quarrels are things of legend. What author alive today would you want to spat? I know that authors are things of legend. I have engaged in many such spats myself. And I am currently engaging in good-natured spats with a half dozen authors that work today. I don't have any one particular writer. If it's a writer that I've never met, I would want to pick a crappy author and say, my spat would be, how about you get a job at a grocery store or something like that and refine your craft for a while. You swanned your throat and you went to the right arts colonies and you got the right grants and you said the right things and you kissed up to the right people in college, but you don't have any talent. You've never actually sat down and worked on your fiction. How about you do that? That'd be my spat with them. How about you do that? Sit down and work on your fiction. Let me help you. If you want, I will help you. Even though I revile your work, I would like it to be better. So let me help you. I've helped many writers. I'd be happy to give you a string of very basic writerly exercises. I will talk to you for a while. I will get to know the lay of the land of you as a writer, and I will pick exercises that strengthen parts of you that are weak. In most contemporary novelists and short story writers that I see in 2019, that's most parts. They mostly can't do anything except write about themselves. So I would be glad to help to strengthen that if that counts as a spat. Adrian surprised me many times in his answers to these questions, and he surprised me this one because he picks Chuck Palahniuk and says that's who you'd like to spat with to make him a better author. And I agree. I agree completely. Adrian he says he wishes he had a platform big enough to get Chuck Palahniuk's attention and anger him into writing a better novel. That's actually a wonderful idea. I wish that he did too. Who knows how many of these authors know about BookTube or watch BookTube? I bet more of them than we think. Question number 7. Have you ever been part of a writer's group? Yes, I have. Many times. Of various sizes, including the big, egregiously overpriced writers group known as a Writers' Workshop, and I largely love them for a lot of the reasons that Adrian says in his tag. I will leave a link to his answers down below. He says that it's really good for you as a writer, and that's self-evident, but it is true. Absolutely true. It's really good for you as a writer to be part of a writers group. It's also lots of fun if you get the right group with the right chemistry. I don't belong to a writers group now, but I do propose one. I do propose that we make a writers group for AuthorTube. There are all sorts of little splinters of writers and people doing writing projects all around BookTube and AuthorTube who do share work with each other, but I'd like an enormous one. An enormous AuthorTube writing group would be so much fun. Let's get it started. Let's put Adrian in charge and get it started. Question number 8. Do you have a favorite writer's craft book? You could have knocked me off my chair when I heard Adrian, in his answers, mention John Gardner, an author with whom I spatted in a very friendly and fun way for years. I agree. Gardner is great on the craft of writing fiction. Great. And he would be my answer if I had a legitimate answer to this question, but I don't think that you can teach writing. I mean, Gardner's books are interesting to read for his observations about work and about writing and about certain authors. But I think the only thing that teaches you writing is to write and to read. And to just do it endlessly. Just do it endlessly until you get better at it. It's just a muscle. It needs to be, in order to improve it, you need to work it, not read about it. You need to work it. So my answer would be John Gardner, anything by John Gardner. I would also suggest reading his novels. But ideally, what I would want is don't buy into the industry that of books and pamphlets and cruises and lectures and magazines, all designed to get would-be writers to feel better about their work. The thing to do is to work, not to think about working. And then question number 9, do you have a least favorite writer's craft book? And of course you know my answer to this question is Stephen King's book on writing. It's terrible. Just terrible. Its advice is so cliche, so fly-blown, so shallow, that the only thing I can say about the book that's even remotely positive is that reading it, you become aware of the fact that you would need to be able to write a book like this in order to write the novels of Stephen King, which are fly-blown and shallow and self-evident and cliched. And his on-writing book perfectly explains his novels. but that doesn't mean it's good. That's not a recommendation. It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. Best to avoid it, but then again, I would suggest avoiding all writing books. Just write. Just write. Just find the time. Half of writing is discipline, anyway. And discipline doesn't require that you read a book about how disciplined you should be. Discipline means that in the course of your very busy evening that does not look like you can break it apart, you do break it apart. You do find half an hour, 45 minutes, even an hour to write. I guarantee you it can be done. Far busier people than you have done it. But that's has nothing to do with learning about, the latest quotes from Kafka or whatever. That's you practicing self-discipline. And that can only be done by doing it, not by reading about it. So really, the whole idea of writing craft books, I would just set to one side. And then number 10, we got to the end of it, is to tag people. And Adrian tagged a bunch of great people. I would tag anyone, any member of AuthorTube. Rachel Morrow, for instance. I would love to hear your questions on this. But a bunch of other, anybody who writes, including, I suspect, quite a few of you who are on BookTube and write in secret. None of that. We're all here for each other. To mock, to praise. So anybody who writes in secret, come out of the shadows and do this tag. And if I can think of anybody else, I'll put them in the comments down below. But that was a fun time. I love AuthorTube tags. I really do. I write all day long. You'd think I'd be more active in AuthorTube. I'll take this as a kick in the pants to become so. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now. I know that this was not Adrian's intent or Strip Cover Lid's intent, but this tag really did cheer me up. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much for being tagged. So I will wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.